I personally do not understand why some of Tinubu's supporters are still confused as to whether Tinubu was indicted or convicted in his US drug case. So many of them have come up to argue that Tinubu was just indicted, he was not convicted. And somebody actually asked that, oh, don't I agree with him that there's a difference between indictment and conviction? Well, I will clarify this in this video. At least after this video, I do not expect that any of you Tinubu supporters will be in any doubt as to whether there was a conviction or there was an indictment or whether there was both. Let's clarify. The first step to clarify this will be to ask, what is an indictment and what is a conviction? Simply stated, an indictment is a formal accusation against someone who is suspected of committing a serious crime, filed after the conclusion of a grand jury investigation. Now, this is what was done by Agent Kevin Moss. The investigation took well over 6 years, and at the end of it, he went to court to swear to an affidavit where he stated all the findings of his investigations, which upon conclusion of that investigation now brought a formal complaint, a formal accusation against Bola Tinubu, and the formal accusations were in form of 2 charges. One was 18 U.S. Code 1956 and the other was 18 U.S. Code 1957. So, was Bola Tinubu indicted in the US? From the definition of indictment and from the documents that were submitted by Special Agent Kevin Moss, I guess your answer is as good as mine, and it's a definitive yes. Tinubu was indicted. Now let's move on to the next question. Was Tinubu convicted? Now, to answer this question, we need to look at the definition of the word conviction. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, it says, in law, conviction is a verdict that is reached by a court of law, finding a defendant guilty of a crime, and the opposite of it is acquittal, that is, not guilty. So, if we put this in perspective of Bola Tinubu's court case, was there a verdict reached in the drugs case against Tinubu in the US? From the final forfeiture order, this is the final forfeiture order you're looking at. The court hereby ordered that the funds in the amount of $460,000 in account 263226700 held by First Heritage Bank in the name of Bola Tinubu represents proceeds of narcotics trafficking or were involved in financial transactions in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1956 and 18 U.S.C. 1957, and therefore these funds are forfeit to the United States pursuant to 21 U.S. 881 and 18 U.S. 981. Does this state that Tinubu is not guilty or that Tinubu is guilty? This states categorically here that the money which Tinubu was made to forfeit represents proceeds of narcotics trafficking. And as such, those funds are forfeited as punishment to the United States pursuant to their laws. So the verdict reached here is simple and clear. Tinubu was found guilty So the punishment for violating 18 US Code 1956 is this: the person who is found guilty of it shall be sentenced to a fine of not more than 500,000 US dollars or twice the value of the property involved in the transaction, whichever is greater, or imprisonment for not more than 20 years, or both. Now, what does our Constitution, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, what does it say? Section 137 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which talks about the qualification that somebody needs to become president of Nigeria, in subsection D, that a person shall not be qualified for election to the office of president if he is under a sentence of death imposed by any competent court of law or tribunal in Nigeria, or a sentence of imprisonment or fine for any offense involving dishonesty or fraud by whatever name called, or for any other offense imposed on him by any court or tribunal or substituted by a competent authority for any other sentence imposed on him by such a court or tribunal. The only place where there is a restriction is if that person is under a sentence of death that is not imposed by a law or tribunal in Nigeria. But if that person has a sentence of imprisonment or a sentence of fine for any offense involving dishonesty or fraud by whatever name called, or for any other offense imposed on him by any court or tribunal, or substituted by a competent authority for any sentence imposed on him by such court or tribunal. You see that by virtue of the fact that Bola Tinubu was indicted in the US and was convicted by way of sentence of fine, he was sentenced to a fine based on the punishment proposed or prescribed for the law he violated, which is 18 US Code 1956 and 1957. He was sentenced to a fine. So what it simply means is that Bola Tinubu has come under a sentence of fine, which was reached by a court of law as a verdict that he was guilty of being in possession of monies that were proceeds of drugs trafficking. It is clear in simple English. Bola Tinubu was not only indicted, he was convicted by sentence of fine. And our Constitution under section 137 subsection D states that if you have come under any sentence of imprisonment or sentence of fine in any court of law anywhere in the world, you will not be qualified to run for office of president. Now, does any of the Tinubu supporters still have any doubt as to whether Tinubu was indeed indicted and convicted? It is clear. Just read the text. Just read. That's all. If only you can just read, you will believe and know that supporting Tinubu is supporting an indicted and convicted person from what we just read. And that person would not qualify to run for office of president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Peter Obi will reclaim his mandate and Nigeria will be better for it. Nigeria will rejoice very soon. I guess this is what is scaring Tinubu and his camp. But no worries. We remain steady, we remain focused, we remain steadfast. Victory ahead.